Zeitoun, page 265, Sunday, September 18th. Zeitoun had been napping through the morning, dazed and sluggish from the heat. His sweat had soaked through the orange jumpsuit. He heard notice that they would be allowed to walk outside again after lunch, and he wasn't sure he could stand to make it. He was disappointed in himself. Part of him had given up, and the part that still believed stood apart from the broken half of his soul, incredulous. The wheels of the nurse's cart echoed down the hallway. He had no reason to think she would help him, but he stood up and made ready to plead with her again. But when he looked down the hall, it was not the nurse, but a man he had never seen before. He was pushing a cart of black books, and he stopped a few cells away from Zeitoun's. He was talking to whichever prisoners were there, and Zeitoun watched him, unable to hear the conversation. The man was black, in his 60s, and watching him interact with the prisoners down the row. It was clear he was a man of God. The books in his cart were Bibles. When he finished and passed by Zeitoun's cell, Zeitoun stopped him. "Please." "Hello," he said. "Hello," the missionary said. He was an almond-shaped eyes, a wide smile. "Would you like to hear about Jesus Christ?" Zeitoun declined. "Please, sir," he said. "Please, I shouldn't be here. I committed no crime, but no one knows I'm here. I haven't gotten a phone call. My wife thinks I'm dead. Can you call her?" The missionary closed his eyes. It was obvious. He often heard things like this. "Please," Zeitoun said. "I know it is hard to believe a man in a cage, but please, can I just give you her number?" So I could only remember Kathy's cell phone number and hoped it would work. The missionary looked up and down the cell block and gave a nod. "Be quick." "Thank you," Zeitoun said. "Her name is Kathy, my wife. We have 4 children." Zeitoun had no pen or paper. "This is against the rules," the missionary said, finding a pen in his cart. He had no paper. Now they were both nervous. The missionary had been too long at his cell. He opened a Bible and tore a page from the back. Zeitoun gave him his number. The missionary stuffed the page into his pocket and moved his cart quickly down the block. Hope rose and died to Zeitoun's heart. He couldn't sit down for hours. He paced, hopped in place, elated. He pictured the missionary leaving the prison, getting to his car, retrieving the number, calling Kathy from the road, or maybe he would wait till he got home. How long could it take? He counted the minutes until Kathy would know. She would know. He estimated the hours until Kathy would arrive here to free him. If she knew he was alive, he could wait. The process might take days, he knew, but he could wait if it meant seeing her. It would be no problem. He pictured it all. He would be free in a day. Zeitoun struggled to sleep that night. There was a man in the world who knew he was alive. He had found his messenger. Monday, September 19th. After breakfast, 2 guards came to Zeitoun's cell. They told Zeitoun about his presence, that his presence was requested. Where? With who? Zeitoun asked. Already it's begun, he thought. The guards told him nothing. They opened his cell, handcuffed him, and shackled his legs together. He was led out of the cell and down the hall. A few minutes later, they arrived at another cell where Zeitoun was deposited. He waited there for 5 minutes until the door opened again. "Van's here," the guard said. The guard handed him to another guard, who walked him down another hallway and to a final gate. The gate opened, and Zeitoun was led to a white van waiting outside. He squinted in the full light of day. He was inserted into the van, the guard riding with him. They drove through the complex until they arrived at the main office at the front of the prison. Zeitoun was led out of the van and handed over to another guard, who led him into the building. Inside, they walked through an immaculate hallway until they arrived at a spare cinder-block office. Outside the office were Nassar, Todd, and Ronnie, sitting on folding chairs in the hallway. Zeitoun was surprised to see them all assembled, and they gave each other looks of mutual bewilderment. Zeitoun was led past them and into a small room. In the room, there were 2 men wearing suits. They sat down and gestured to Zeitoun that he could take a seat. They were from the Department of Homeland Security, they said. They smiled warmly at Zeitoun and told him that they needed to ask him some simple questions. They asked him what he did for a living. He told them that he was a painter and contractor. They asked him why he hadn't left the city when everyone had evacuated. He told them that he never left New Orleans during storms and that he had a number of properties he wanted to watch over. They asked about Tad, Nassar, and Ronnie, how he knew them. He explained his relationship to each. They asked him why he didn't have any money on him. "What am I going to do with money in a canoe during a flood?" Zeitoun said. "But Nassar had money," one of the men said. Zeitoun shrugged. He could not account for why Nassar had money with him. The interview lasted less than 30 minutes. Zeitoun was struck by how friendly the men were, how easy the questions were. They did not ask about terrorism. They did not accuse him of plotting against the United States. At the end, they apologized for what Zeitoun had been through and asked if there was anything they could do for him. "Please call Kathy," he said. They said they would. Kathy was in a state. She'd just gotten the call from the missionary a few hours before, and now the phone was ringing again. Yuko, who had been fielding calls for days, no longer knew what to do. Kathy picked it up. A man introduced himself as belonging to the Department of Homeland Security. He confirmed that Zeitoun was at Alien Hunt Correctional Center. He's fine, ma'am. We have no more interest in him. You have no more interest in him? Is that good or bad? That's good. Well, what was he in there for? Well, they have looting on his arrest sheet, but those charges will be dropped. The call was brief and businesslike. When she hung up, Kathy praised and thanked God for his mercy. She shrieked and jumped around the house with Yuko. I knew he was alive, Yuko. I knew it. God is good, they said. God is good. They called Yuko's husband and made plans to get the kids out of school early. They had to celebrate and plan. There was so many things to do. First of all, Kathy had to go. She knew she had to go. She had to leave that day for the prison. She didn't know where it was yet, but she had to go. Where was it? She looked it up online. St. Gabriel, less than an hour from Baton Rouge. She called Hunt and was bounced around to the various automated extensions until she reached a person. She could barely speak. She wanted to fly through the phone and be there with him. I'm trying to reach my husband. He's in there. The prisoner's name? The woman asked. Kathy had to take a breath. She could not stomach the idea of her husband being called a prisoner, but naming him, she was expanding this lie. The one being told by everyone involved in his incarceration thus far. Abdul Rahman Zeitoun, she said, and spelled it. Kathy heard the typing of computer keys. He's not here, the woman said. Kathy spelled the name again. Again, the sound of typing. We have no one by that name, the woman reiterated. Kathy tried to remain calm. She told the woman that she had just received a call from someone from Homeland Security, and that the man had told her that Abdul Zeitoun was at the very prison. We have no record of him, the woman said. She went on to say that Hunt had no records of anyone who came via the hurricane. None of the prisoners from New Orleans were in their computer system. All of those records were on paper, and we don't have that paper. We have no actual records of any of those people. They're FEMA's. Kathy almost collapsed. She was spinning, helpless. She didn't have a number for the Homeland Security man who had called. She cursed herself for not asking for a way to contact him, and now she was being told that her husband was not in the institution where the Homeland Security people and the missionary had seen him. Was this some kind of game? Had he been there at all? He might have been moved already. He had been a prisoner at Hunt, but then some other agency wanted him. He had been spirited away to a secret prison somewhere. She had to go. She had to go to Hunt Correctional Center and insist she see him. She had a right to see him. If he wasn't there, she would demand that they tell her where he'd been taken. It was the only way. She told Yuko and Ahmad she was going. Where? They asked. Hunt, the prison, she said. They asked her if she was sure he was there. She was not. They asked if she was sure she would be allowed to visit. She was not. They asked where she would stay. Kathy didn't know. Already she was crying again. She didn't know what to do next. They convinced her to stay in Phoenix for the time being until she could be sure of Zeitoun's whereabouts and how she could actually help him. She needed to be smart, they said. They didn't want to worry about her, too. Kathy called Riley Ulmer, an attorney they had worked with before. Riley had helped a few of Zeitoun's workers who had legal issues to straighten out. Riley's father was a well-known and powerful lawyer in New Orleans, and Riley thought, though in the family business, had chosen to break away, at least in his appearance. He wore his brown hair long, usually pulled back in a ponytail. He worked downtown and took on a wide variety of cases, from traffic tickets to criminal defense. Kathy was sure he would know how to straighten this Hunt business. There was no answer. She left a message. Kathy called Ahmad in Spain and woke him up. She didn't care. He's alive, she said. He yelled a string of thank gods and praise gods. Where is he? He asked. With you? No, he's in prison, Kathy said, but it's okay. I know where he is. We'll get him out. Ahmad was silent. Kathy could hear him breathing. How? How will you get him out? He asked. Kathy did not have a plan just yet, but she had a lawyer and had put a call into him, and you need to go there, Ahmad said. You have to see him and get him out. You must. Kathy was unsettled by Ahmad's tone. He seemed almost as worried by Zeitoun's incarceration as he had been by his disappearance. Vazia, Zeitoun's sister in Jabaloss, called soon after. Kathy told her the good news. We know where he is. He is in prison. He's okay. Another long silence. Have you seen him? She asked. Kathy said she had not, but that she was sure she would soon. You need to see him, Fazia said. You need to find him. In the afternoon, Riley Ulmer called Kathy back. He had fled the city just before the storm and had been staying in Baton Rouge. His house in New Orleans was under 6 feet of water. Kathy told him about what happened to Zeitoun. What? Riley said. I just saw him on TV. He had seen the local broadcast of Zeitoun in his canoe. Kathy told him about the calls from the missionary and the Homeland Security officials. Now they had seen him at Hunt. Riley was reassuring. He already knew all about Hunt. After the storm, he set up a makeshift office in Baton Rouge and was already working with prisoners brought to the prison. The system's broken, he said. There was no means to post bail. It would take some time before it could be rectified. Riley promised that he would get Zeitoun released, but given the state of the courts, there was none to speak of. He could not predict or guarantee a timeline. Tuesday, September 20th. In the morning, Ahmad called Kathy tense. Did you tell Fazil that Abdul-Rahman was in prison? His tone was severe. Yes, she asked, and no, he said, and then softened. Let's not do that. Don't worry them. We cannot tell them he's in prison. We cannot do that. Okay, but I just thought... Well, call them and tell them he's fine. He's home. It was a mistake. Okay? We need to tell them this. You don't understand the worry they'll have if they think he's in jail. Okay, should I? I'll call them and tell them he's fine. If they call you, tell them the same. He's at home, he's safe, all is fine. You made a mistake, okay? This is what we tell them, okay? Okay, she said. Ahmad wanted to know which prison he was in. Kathy told him it was in St. Gabriel, and that because the legal system was in limbo, it would be some time before they could even hope to get Abdul-Rahman out. But she had spoken to a lawyer, and he was on the case. It was only a matter of time. But Ahmad was thinking beyond simple cases of attorneys and bail. He did not want his brother in prison at all. A Syrian in an American prison in 2005, this was not to be trifled with. Abdul-Rahman had to be seen. He had to be freed immediately. The next time Kathy checked her email, she saw a message from Ahmad. She had been CC'd. He was trying to find Zeitoun, but he had gotten the wrong city. He had done an internet search for San Gabriel in the United States and found a match, and had written this. Cab Zeitoun, Acosta Alex, subject urgent from Spain. The San Gabriel Police Department, San Gabriel, California. Dear Sides, my name is Ahmad Zeitoun from Spain. Reason I'm looking for my brother, New Orleans, Katrina evacuated on September 7th. I missed the contact with my brother, which we talked daily by phone after Hurricane Katrina batch. I asked every place in order to have any news about him. Lastly, I learned that the police force forced him on September 6th to evacuate his house in New Orleans and tacked him for St. Gabriel, and he is actually still arrested at St. Gabriel. Kindly would you please, if there is possibility, to learn if he is all right, and if it's possible to talk to him or to call me by collected call to my phone, number omitted. The detail of my brother is name Abdul Zeitoun, date of birth, address 4649 Darch Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. Will be very kind from you just to let me know if he's all right. Thanking you indeed, Ahmad Zeitoun, Malaga, Spain. Kathy began to see the situation through Ahmad's eyes. What if the prosecutors, hoping to justify Zeitoun's incarceration, tried to make a case against him, a connection, any distant connection to some terrorist activity, any connection, no matter how spacious, might be used to justify the incarceration extended? Kathy did not want to think this way. Thursday, September 22nd. She called Raleigh Ulmer again. He had called Hunt, and they had confirmed that Zeitoun was there. Kathy called Ahmad and told him the news. But has anyone seen him? He asked. No, she said. Then we can't be sure, he said. Ahmad, I'm sure that you have to go, he said. Kathy, please. He apologized. He knew that he was pushing too hard, that he was calling Kathy too often, but his mind was filled with images of his brother on his knees in an orange jumpsuit and outdoor cage. Every additional hour Zeitoun was in custody increased the chances of something taking a turn for the worse. I'll fly to New Orleans, he said. And do what? Kathy asked. I'll find him, he said. Don't, she said. They'll put you in jail, too. Friday, September 23rd. By now, Raleigh was familiar with some of the judges and administrators working to process the post-storm prisoners being kept at Hunt. Hoping to get Zeitoun's case dismissed, Raleigh told Kathy it was time to come to Baton Rouge. She should fly out and be ready to come to the prison at a moment's notice. There was a chance she could visit him on Monday. Kathy booked a flight and called Adnan Zeitoun's cousin. Abdul-Rahman? He asked. Hesitant? He's okay, she said. He exhaled. She told him the story of her husband's incarceration, and she was coming to get him. You'll stay with us, Adnan said. After sleeping on the floor of a Baton Rouge mosque for the first week, he and his wife had rented an apartment for the month and were living there. Adnan would pick her up and drive her to the prison. Sunday, September 25th. There was something wrong with the airplane. They were flying so low, descending too quickly. Kathy was certain the plane would crash. She no longer trusted anything about New Orleans, even the sky above the city. She gripped the armrest. She looked around to see if anyone else was alarmed. The pilot's voice came on the intercom. He announced that they were flying low over the city so the passengers could survey the damage. Kathy couldn't look. When they landed, the airport was desolate. No one was there. There was an airport security officer, New Orleans police, National Guardsmen, but few civilians. The passengers of Kathy's plane seemed to be the only people in the building. All the stores were closed. The lights were dim. There was detritus all over the floors, garbage, papers, bandages, and other medical supplies. Adnan picked her up, and they drove to the apartment he and Abir had rented in Baton Rouge. Kathy, exhausted and overwhelmed, fell asleep with her shoes on. Monday, September 26th. Zeitoun knew nothing about the work Kathy and Relly were doing. He still had not been allowed a phone call. All he knew was that he had been assured by both the missionary and the Homeland Security men that they would call his wife. But since then, he had no assurance that contact had been made. After lunch, Zeitoun was taken from his cell and again handcuffed and brought to the same building near the front gate of the prison. Inside, he was brought to a small cinder-block room where a table and a handful of chairs had been arranged. Sitting on one side of the table was a man in his late 50s wearing a suit. On the other side were two men in coats and ties. 3 other prisoners were seated in chairs at the back of the room, of some kind of courtroom. A young man introduced himself to Zeitoun as a public defender. He would be representing Zeitoun that day. Zeitoun began to explain his case, the mistakes that had been brought to the prison, and asked for an immediate phone call to his wife. The public defender closed his eyes to indicate that Zeitoun should stop talking. "You're not here to be judged," he said. "This is just a hearing to set bail." "But don't you want—" "Please," the young man said, "just don't say anything. Let me speak for you. Just sit and quiet if you can. Don't say a word." The charges against Zeitoun were read: possession of stolen property valued at $500. The prosecution suggested setting bail at $150,000. The defender countered that Zeitoun had no prior record and the bail should be far lower. He suggested $35,000. The judge set the bail at $75,000, and that was the end of Zeitoun's hearing. The defender extended his hand to Zeitoun, and Zeitoun shook it. He was led out of the room as the defender opened the file for the next prisoner. On his way out, Zeitoun again asked for a phone call. The defender shrugged. "But why set bail when I can't tell anyone I'm in prison?" Zeitoun asked. From the judge, the prosecutor, and the defender, there was no answer. Zeitoun was brought back to his cell. Riley called Kathy. "Okay," he said. "They finally have a system arranged, and they've got a court date. They want to be clear the doc gets as much as we want him out of there. So gather as many people as you can to come to the court and testify on his behalf, character witnesses." This seemed sensible enough to Kathy. It was a clear-cut task, and she dug in. But while making a list of friends to call, she realized she had forgotten to ask Riley what the courthouse was. She called him back and got his voicemail. She called the New Orleans District Attorney's Office. A recording gave her a number in Baton Rouge. She called it, expecting to get a recording, but to her surprise, a woman answered the phone on the second ring. Kathy asked for the address of the courthouse. "We don't have one right now," the woman said. "What?" Kathy said. "I just need the address of the courthouse where the hearings are. The hearings for prisoners in Hunt? I just need the court address." "We don't have one of those," the woman said. "A court? Right. Where are people going to pay tickets?" "No one's paying tickets right now," the woman said. Kathy asked to speak to a supervisor. She was transferred, and this time a man picked up the phone. Kathy explained that she had just gotten her word. Her husband had been arrested, and now there was a court date. She only wanted to know where court hearings were going to be held. "Oh, we can't tell you that," the man said. "What? You can't tell me?" "No, that's privileged information," he said. "Privileged for who? I'm his wife." "I'm sorry, that's private information." "It's not private, it's public," Kathy screamed. "That's the point. It's a public court." She asked to speak to another, more knowledgeable person. The man sighed and put her on hold. Finally, a third person, a woman, picked up the phone. "What is it you want?" she asked. Kathy composed herself, hoping that perhaps the 2 other officials hadn't heard her clearly. She said, "I want to know the location of the court where sentencing and bail hearings are being held." The woman's voice was even and firm. "That is private information." Kathy fell apart. She wailed and screamed. Somehow, knowing that her husband was so close, but that these layers of bureaucracy and incompetence were keeping her from him, it was too much. She cried out of frustration and rage. She felt like she was watching a baby drown, unable to do anything to save it. She gathered herself and called CNN. She reached a producer and told her the story. Her husband's in incarceration, call from Homeland Security, the stonewalling the courts that didn't even exist. The producer said she would investigate and took Kathy's number. Riley called back. He apologized. Now he knew where the hearing was to be held at Hunt itself. He told Kathy to call anyone he could and tell them to be at Hunt the next day at 9 a.m. "I'm going to try to see Zeitoun today," he said. Kathy prayed that he would. Kathy began calling friends, neighbors, and clients. In 2 hours, she managed to secure at least 7 people said they would come, including the principal of her daughter's school. Zeitoun was again called out of his cell for a meeting. He was handcuffed, his legs were chained, and again he was led to the white van. He was driven to the front of the prison complex and was brought to another small cinder block room, where he saw Raleigh, the first representative of the outside world he'd seen since his arrest. He smiled, and they shook hands warmly. "I want to get out," Zeitoun said. "You have to pay to get out," Riley said. He sighed deeply. "We've got a situation with this bail." Zeitoun could either fine and pay $75,000, and if he eventually won his case, he would be refunded the full amount, or he could pay 13% of the bail to the courts and 3% to the bondsman, about $10,000 total, and regardless of the outcome of the case, he would lose that amount. "Isn't $75,000 a lot for petty theft?" Zeitoun asked. Riley agreed it was. It was about 100 times what it should be. Zeitoun could find the 10,000, but it seemed silly to him to throw away that much money. It would be, in effect, paying the government for incarcerating him for a month. "Can't you reduce it?" Zeitoun asked. "I'll have to fight for it," Riley said. "Well, then fight for it," Zeitoun said. "What if it doesn't work?" Riley asked. "Then check if we can use my property as bail," Zeitoun said. "You don't want to pay the bond?" "No," Zeitoun said. If he paid for his release, what would he do? After all, he couldn't work. There was nothing to do in New Orleans, not yet, and by now he knew that Kathy and his kids knew he was alive. He trusted that he would be released, so he would be paying $10,000 to be free for a few extra days, and he would spend that time pacing around Yuko and Ahmad's living room. He would see his daughters, yes, but they knew he was safe now, and the money would be better spent elsewhere. In their college trust, for example. He had already been kept 2.5 weeks. He could wait a few more days. "I'll check about using your property as collateral," Riley said. "Call Kathy," Zeitoun said. Kathy drove into Hunt, holding her breath. It was a surreal sight. The tidy white fencing, the bright green lawn, it looked like a golf course where birds scattered as she made her way down the long driveway and up to the gate. In the parking lot, she stood outside and waited. It was 8:30 in the morning, and she needed all the friends they had. They began to arrive a few minutes later. Rob and Walt had driven from Lafayette. Jennifer Caldon, who worked with Walt and whose house Zeitoun had renovated, arrived with her husband and father. Tom and Celeste Burchard, neighbors on Claiborne, had driven from Houston. Nabel Archibald, the principal at the girls' school, had driven from a French quarter. They all embraced. No one had been sleeping. They all looked terrible and were shocked that such a thing had brought them together, but they were heartened somewhat to know that they would be able to speak about the character of Abdulrahman Zeitoun. They were confident that when the judge heard from them all and realized that the police had imprisoned a well-known businessman, the judge might very release him that day. Perhaps they could all celebrate together. Kathy couldn't stop thanking them. She was a wreck of tears and gratitude and anticipation. When Raleigh arrived, he was impressed. He gathered everyone together and gave them a brief rundown of how the proceedings would go. He wasn't sure exactly where the hearing would take place or even what time, but he was confident that between Zeitoun's reputation, lack of any prior infractions, and the showing of character witness, a wide swath of upstanding New Orleans, the judge would release Abdulrahman with profuse apologies. They waited through the morning, no word. Finally, Riley went to see what was happening. He came back, his face a cloud. "They won't see any of you," he said. "The hearing has been canceled." There was no explanation why.